Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to my Politics 2100 video cast here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling Anarchism and Anarchoid Tendencies, a destructive dead end for the left. So there are a lot of ways this could be titled and a lot of ways to criticize anarchism and what I'm calling anarchoid tendencies. But I picked a sort of general one, and I could go into details about any number of different aspects of why anarchism doesn't work and why it's a destructive chimera or, vision of paradise that is leads to a dead end. And it's also a little bit of kind of I'm just picking this random moment here to talk about this because it's a background in some left context and left discussions that there's something good about anarchism, or something good can come of it, or that it's something that we should treat as a serious ideology. And also, so I also use the word anarchoid tendencies because there are actually very few people who call themselves anarchists or anarcho-syndicalists or black bloc anarchists. And I guess when people talk about Antifa, and Antifa, anti-fascist can be someone of any political tendency who is against fascism, but the word became claimed in the 1990s by people who are kind of what I would call black bloc anarchists, and it became another version of their thinking or just labeling or branding. But I don't want to get into, it's become the word Antifa has become such a word that's misunderstood and misused, and I am an anti-fascist myself, but I don't really, Antifa as, when it's actually being used, and it's not used by many people, it's not something that I feel drawn to because it is anarchoid or anarchist. So, and anyway, so the main issue here is, is anarchism realistic, and is it helpful, and does it represent the best impulses of humanity, or is it a pipe dream that is, in my view, narcissistic and petulant and unhelpful in actually freeing people as much as they can be freed from tyranny, okay, and from the yoke of among other things, oppressive corporate or capitalist regimes, and also oppressive states, okay? So I'm someone who is always, even when the Eastern Bloc or the Soviet Bloc existed, I was for the rights of people to protest in those regimes, the state socialist or statist regimes, or whatever you want to call them, state capitalist, there are different names that they have that you can devise for what those, quote unquote, communist countries are in terms of their actual social systems, but totalitarian, sometimes maybe. It's been an inspiration to some young people and some older people, but to think that people should throw off the yoke of the state and government, and people should organize a stateless way, or people should become, the primary enemy is having a government at all, and having, and so, or state in the more serious sounding left-wing jargon, or the, that's also used in academia to describe, governments, and anyway, so basically, and this is often also probably the area where this is most relevant contemporarily, is in discussions of policing, and I'll do some videos about that at some point or other, and that's not currently the absolute top of mind for people right now, but it is something that will continue to emerge, and it depends on who you are and whether you've been recently victimized by the police, and or you know someone who has been. So the policing is one area where these ideas are still actually relevant to even policy and public policy discussion. So you could say that even though people deny this, you could say the demand to defund, quote unquote, defund the police, which was a poorly worded demand, and people are going to criticize me for saying it's poorly worded, that I'm not being sufficiently appreciative of the hardworking and brave activists who felt motivated by that word. But I'm still going to say it's a terrible framing of the demand, or let's say it's terrible is perhaps too judgmental a word, but it's a framing that leads to a dead end and to the defeat of the movement, or the premature defeat of the movement, or stymieing of it. Okay. Because it suggests that basically, we're going to just pull the funding 100%. Defund is 100. It means in most contexts 100% taking the funds away from a project. It disappears, or it only becomes a bunch of volunteers because they don't have any funding. So it's defunded. So anyway, in that context, it's simply playing around with an anarchoid idea. I don't think the people who are proposing this are necessarily quote unquote anarchists, okay? But they are playing in the wake of the idea that we can do without police, or we can do without a state, monitoring to some degree our behavior, or policing, certain bad behavior, and arresting lawbreakers and then putting them in front of it through a judicial trial to see if they, are, guilty or not of whatever it is they've been accused of. And so, anyway, so this has all been fundamental to almost every large society, this process, society of any size, of having a law enforcement and having judicial system, and the idea that you could pull the plug on one aspect of it immediately, or at least have a demand that that then you have to walk back. You say, well, no, I didn't really mean, but I wanted to appear radical, and I wanted to pose as an anarchoid person, and look daring, and try to flirt with contrarianism, and can flirt with and there are a lot of people who do that, okay, in different forms, not necessarily with that demand, but that's a stance that people go to very often to say, look at me, look at my demands, look at my writing, or look at my blog, and so anyway, it's not conceivable in any time in in the future, in the foreseeable future, let's say, that we could do without something like a police, something like law enforcement, something like a judicial system, and because people will, in living together, will commit crimes against one another, and or large organizations, and we want to expand so it's not only just little small fry people or ordinary people on the ground, but also we want to have a judicial system and police for elite crime committers, or people who, and there's been too little of that. Okay, so in some sense we have an over policing of certain groups within our society who are marginalized, and then an under policing of the very powerful, very wealthy, and at least certainly an under prosecution of them, if not if policing is the wrong word for the entire process, but we need district attorney and a process by which white collar crime is looked into and is prosecuted, potentially with conviction if there is enough evidence for that. And the opposite of, in terms of just giving up on the whole on the idea of enforcing laws, will lead to a society where the most brutal will dominate the society, and this is often what happens, for instance, in miniature, in demonstrations where, for whatever reason, let's say the police sort of let the demonstration go, and there is a black bloc in them. The black bloc, which is sort of the anarchist people, will start to dominate the way the demonstration is dominate the street level expression of the demonstration, and also in the media, the message of the demonstration will be entirely washed out by the kinds of damage, the kinds of rock throwing, and whatever physical damage, fire setting. I've witnessed it myself in some demonstrations here in Oakland, and this doesn't help the movement, and it's the movement for Black Lives, the movement for police reform, okay, serious reform, and even budget cutting, okay, which is fine, which is good, if the budgets are cut in a strategic way, and then funds are reallocated to social services, which is the message that people say, well, no, that's what I meant by defund the police. Well, defund the police doesn't say that, okay? And anyway, it creates, and I'm going to do another video about this, but it's based on a very naive idea about humanity and about how human beings are there was a recent video I did about the auxiliary superego. I think it's number 33, okay, where basically any reasonable account of how we act in a way that's better, okay, usually involves some kind of help from outside. In other words, we're not all angels, okay? We're not all, we have good and bad in us, so forth and so on, and we can, and we need help from our community, and we need help also from authorities who are at some position of power that we should be giving via democratic process, and keeping it in check through a democratic process. But anyway, but still, people who are supposed to lead, and they're supposed to also be have some oversight over the governing of society, which includes our behavior, among other things. So, and based on some agreements and consensus about, in general, about a consensus that we can't all sit in a large meeting and come to, but over time that develops about what is generally considered right or wrong, or so forth and so on. So anyway, so the anarchism or anarchoid groups or inspired groups seem to think that we can do without that. And it's entirely in agreement with basically sociopaths, people who want just to act out and do what they want at any given moment in time, and also elite sociopaths and people like like Donald Trump and others. It's a similar orientation to some degree, though. They're vastly different people, and they're starting from a different place, many of them, but there's a common sense that it's an affront to our humanity that we have, a government that does this auxiliary superego thing that helps us with our doing things, keeping us on the absolute best path, and they're pissed off about that. They think it's a wound. It's something they don't think is, it's a narcissistic affront. So this is where we get into talking about narcissism, and there are many people from parts of our society that don't call themselves anarchists who still like there's sets of libertarians and so forth and so on, or basically wealthy who tend to be sort of the white collar or the wealthy white collar property owning version of this, who feel that it's an affront. The idea of having this sort of government that's kind of regulating business and also regulating society is an affront to the idea of humanity, and they're, to me, they're just operating with a entirely unrealistic and ahistorical view of humanity and what we could be, and also the idea of freedom, for instance, which is a great value. Freedom is created by being in a society where the laws are both protective of people, but also enabling of people, including a social system that enables people to do things which they wouldn't do if they were, in a capitalistic competition with each other for a limited set of goods, okay, or the set of goods that can be produced at any one given time, and goods and services. So anyway, so there's versions of this, what I'm calling anarchoid tendencies, that you could find in different political flavors, okay. And I mean, there are also people who call themselves anarcho-capitalists, okay, which are literally people who think that corporations should be entirely autonomous and there should be no government, just a bunch of corporations that are supposedly able to self-govern. So, but they can't. They're not able to do that. And so this is so commonsensical But in another video, I'll talk about where this impulse comes from in terms of our political philosophy and our beliefs, because it is something that's persistent. So I'm not saying that when everyone listens to my video and my assertions here, or even if I went on at length about all the grounding for each of these assertions, that they would still that they would give up their belief. I think it's an attractive idea, and I think it comes from a current in our society. I'm calling it Rousseauvian current. Okay, it's from Rousseau. Okay, the political philosopher, and so I think that is an impulse that goes throughout our society, and it's not something that we necessarily want to get rid of or overthrow. But the political project of anarchist and anarchoid ideas is a dead end, and we need to be talking more about how, and rather than whether we have a government, is that how we have a government, how we have laws, how the laws ensure and help freedom. So if we take off the whether off, we can then start to have much more productive discussions about what are the freest societies, and how, with freedom being one value. But anyway, I'm just playing to this, the appeal of anarchist ideas. But anyway, how is the freest society? How are laws implemented in the freest society? How are and what also supports, what material supports are there in the freest societies? And can we get there? Can everybody get there? In the world, and soon. There are other things going on that which are not just this sort of political project that I'm just putting this out there, that even if you accept freedom as the summum bonum, the highest and best value, the anarchism is immediately a dead end for that project. And it's so commonsensical. I just don't I don't see how anybody can argue sensibly for the contrary. But please, in the comments, if you do have a sensible argument for the contrary, please offer it, or a sketch of it. And also, if you're agreeing, it's fine too to agree in the comments. And also, if you like this video, and if you're liking the general topics that I'm discussing and how I'm discussing them, please subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.